Banzai! Banzai!
Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. Aki Basho 2022 coming up, and that means we have a Banzuke to talk about. Now, if you're watching a Banzuke video, you probably know why this Banzuke is gonna be pretty hard to predict, to say the least. But just in case this is coming to you years from now, or if it just got fed to you through the YouTube algorithm and you're not really sure what's going on, let me explain. Normally, a sumo wrestler will fight 15 times in a tournament, and they'll end up with a record. So Shodai 10-5, 15 fights, Abi 8-7, 15 fights. Well, you see this third number that a lot of people have? That's how many fights they missed. Under most circumstances, if somebody misses fights, those are counted as losses. So Takano Sho here, 1-6-8, he left the tournament due to injury. He'll be treated as 1-14. He lost 6 times and he missed 8 fights. So his rank is going to go down quite a bit. But everyone else here, if they have a third number by their names, that's because they dropped out due to COVID. Either they caught it or somebody near them caught it and it forced them out. COVID absences have been treated as kind of null and void. Like, if you are out due to COVID, like Takayasu missed the entire tournament, so he should be kept at 4 West. He should not move. But what do you do when a guy catches COVID partway through? How does his record up to that point affect where he ends up on the Banzuke next time? Well, that's what the Banzuke committee is going to have to figure out, and if we're trying to predict it, we have to decide what they're going to decide. That's this video. So, without further ado, let's get into this. One thing I want to note right away. As you can see, we have asterisks by a lot of these names. These are all the guys that had to leave the tournament due to COVID. Now, if you look at an official Banzuke listing of their records are all going to look a little bit different. They're all going to have 1 more loss and 1 fewer absence. So Tamawashi shows up as 5, 8, and 2 rather than 5, 7, and 3. The reason is that each of them was given a default loss for the fight that they had to drop out on. So Tamawashi had to get pulled from his day 13 fight. He took an official loss for that, but he never got a chance to fight. So what you're looking at here with those guys is their record in the fights they actually participated in. And then the absence number is how many they missed due to COVID, including the one that they officially quote unquote lost. That's important for the guys who have 7 wins or 7 losses, or especially 7 losses, because their official records say they have 8 losses, which is a makekoshi, but they didn't actually lose 8 fights, and that can play into, theoretically, what the Banzuke committee is going to do. Okay, let's clear this, and let's move everybody off to the side, as we always do to start our Banzuke predictions. Except this time we're doing it a little bit differently. As you can see, we've got 4 guys who are sitting in place. Now, I kept them in white, and you may have noticed why or wondered why. Well, Koto Shoho, Koto Echo, and Daisho all finished 50-50 in the fights they actually fought. So we've got Daisho 6-6, we've got Koto Echo 5-5, we've got Koto Shoho 5-5. I am working with the assumption that they will not be moved. Likewise, Takayasu did not fight at all due to COVID in his stable, and so I do not think he is going to move. Now, you may recall Ichino, after his COVID absence recently, was dropped a rank. So we're keeping in mind that this can happen, but as you're going to see, there's really no reason to move Takayasu, and the other guys, I think they are going to do everything in their power not to move any of them, because how can you justify moving them up or down when they didn't have a winning or losing record during the fights that they actually participated in? Okay, let's get to the initial setup. So we've got Daisho, Takayasu, Kotoeko, and Kotoshoho in place. They're not moving. They're going absolutely nowhere. They're stuck and we have to work around them. Let's start now with the Sanyaku, because that actually works out pretty easily. You see a whole lot of winning records and Mitakeumi. But Mitakeumi, as we see, 249. He missed 9 fights due to COVID. Now this was a kind of a big question because he was Kadoban. If he had a losing record, he was going to drop out of Ozeki. And because he was injured, it looked like there was a real chance of that happening. So COVID kind of saved him. It's already been said he's not leaving the Ozeki ranks. He's going to stay there. I don't know if it's been made clear whether he'll still be considered Kadoban. I assume he will be, but for our purposes, that doesn't really matter. Shodai is going to go ahead of him because if he stays Ozeki, it doesn't matter if he's 1 West or 2 West. So Shodai will go up, and then Mitakeumi is going to end up going down a slot, but he's just going to end up at 2 West. Now, when you've got Wakatake Kage with a winning record, and Abi with a winning record, and Hoshoryu with a winning record, now you've only got the question of, well, what do we do with Daisho? Well, I've already said, because he's 6-6, there's really no way that they can move him and justify it. So there's nowhere for any of these guys to go. Hoshoryu at 9-6 is not at a level, well, he didn't perform at a level where they're going to make a new Sekiwake slot for him, because that usually takes like 11 wins. So everybody's just going to stay here. And now we have the question of Ichinojo and after him, Kirabayama. So Ichinojo was ranked behind Kirabayama. Why do I say it like that? Why do we consider Ichinojo first? Well, because he went 12-3, and his calculated rank is basically up here. But there's nobody in the Sanyaku who drops out to make space for him. So what do we do? Well, the Banzuke committee has the right to open new slots at Komusubi or even Sekiwake if somebody performs incredibly well and they deserve that kind of promotion, even when no actual slot exists to put them in. So for Ichinojo to only be bumped to Maegashira 1 with this kind of performance is incredibly difficult to imagine. Most likely he's going to get bumped up to Komusubi 2. So basically in this range, right? Most people that I've seen talking about this are in relative agreement that this is going to happen. It would be shocking if this didn't happen. Not only does he deserve it, but he also rates way ahead of Kirabayama, and since Kirabayama is Maegashira 1 East, you can't put Ichi ahead of him without making another Komusubi slot. So okay, Komusubi 2 for Ichi. But what do we do with Kirabayama? 8-7, I mean, that should get a promotion, right? But do we open another Komusubi slot for Kirabayama? I will give a spoiler here. I say yes. The reason is based on research. So let's get into that. You're going to see some of the secrets behind how the information is gathered here. This is the Sumo reference site. A lot of you will recognize it. For some of you, this will be new. If you don't recognize this, if you've never been here, I highly recommend checking it out if you have any interest in sumo history, sumo statistics, anything like that. The site is sumodb.sumogames.de. There will be a link in the description. You can also just Google SumoDB and you'll find it. What is really interesting about this is the sheer quantity of information that's available, especially about records, banzukes, things like that. This channel would be very difficult to do anything with if this site didn't exist. The information that I get out of here forms the basis of a ton of what I do outside of the Yeats videos. The basic tool that helps me with this is the query function, which you can see up in the top here. Speaking about Kirabayama specifically, like I said, I think he's going to be promoted to a second Komusubi slot, or to a fourth Komusubi slot, if you will. But why? What information do we have here that leads me to that conclusion? Well, first we go to query, and then we look up Maegashira 1 East with 8 wins. Now, I always start by looking at the range of 2004 to 2022. This is because 2004 is when they made Makuuchi 42 wrestlers, and that doesn't change, and Juryo 28 wrestlers, and that doesn't change. Before that, they would alter it a little bit. It became, when you go through the records, the number of wrestlers in each division could change wildly way in the past, and it got narrowed down, and then eventually we ended up with the numbers that we know today. That happened in 2004. So if we just look at that, we see 24 results where guys had 8 wins specifically at Maegashira 1 East. And as you can see, every single one of them, except for one, ended up at Komusubi. It might have been East or West, but it was always Komusubi. The exception was at Sekiwake. So all of them got promoted. But this doesn't really help because we're talking about somebody getting promoted to Komusubi 2. That's what that extra rank is considered, Komusubi 2. So what do we do here? Well, we're going to have to modify this. When 2004 doesn't go back far enough, the other one that makes sense, sometimes I'll do it from 2000 just to say in the 21st century, but 1958 is the other really important date because that's when they started doing 6 tournaments per year. Before that, they had kind of a variable number. It slowly went up over the years, but this is when they started doing 6. So from 1958 to 2022, what do we see? Well, here we've got some Komusubi 2s. We also have some Maegashira 1s. So let's point out exactly what we have here. So in 1958, we have a Komusubi 2. In 59, we have a Maegashira 1, no promotion. Here we've got a 2. Here we've got Maegashira 1, Maegashira 1, Komusubi 2, Komusubi 2, Komusubi 2. Now, obviously, as you can see, we are going to need to scroll down a bit, but if we look at Takatariki and just use him as our point of reference, he is now here. And as you can see, now we're getting to 2004, and from here on out, everybody got promoted. So we're going to scroll back up. We're going to clear this and scroll back up. And we're just going to look at the points in time where there is a no promotion or a Komusubi 2 promotion. More importantly, we're going to look at the most recent ones. So 92 and 95, we had 2 Komusubi 2 promotions. The last time that a guy went 8-7 at Maegashira 1 East and was not promoted was all the way back in 69, and it happened also in 1968. Now we need to look at the Banzukes for all 4 of these wrestlers. The guys in the 60s to see why they weren't promoted, and the guys in the 90s to see why they were worthy of opening up extra Komusubi slots. Let's start with Haru 1968. Keno Yama is the Rikishi in question. Why didn't he go up? Well, Kurinji, by getting to 12-3 at Komusubi, he took over for Meno Yama. Now, Meno Yama, if you're a little familiar with how Banzukes are done now, oh, he was Sekiwake at 7-8. Well, wouldn't he just drop and take that Komusubi slot? Well, no. As you can see in the next Basho, he got dropped all the way to Maegashira 1. Back in the day, they would do this. So who took that Komusubi slot? Well, it was Wakanami. So at 13-2 at Maegashira 8, that would move him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 slots. Whereas Keno Yama only rates, mathematically, 1. So they gave it to Wakanami. The Nagoya 1969 Banzuke was very similar. Ryuko, he was 8-7, Maegashira 1 East, didn't go up. Wakafutase, 3-12 at Komusubi, so he's dropping down. But Fujinokawa, 12-3 at 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Obviously, mathematically rates quite a bit better than Ryuko, and they gave him the spot. This is not something that we really see now. Guys who do really well at lower ranks simply have to accept a bit of a lesser promotion so that guys higher up who do deserve some kind of promotion receive it. For example, looking at this very year, In Haru 2022, Daisho was 8 and 7. So he rates that little move. Well, Kirabayama was 10 and 5 at Maegashira 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Takayasu was 12 and 3 at Maegashira 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Kotonowaka 11 and 4 at 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or sorry, 7. So all of them rated higher than Daisho mathematically. In fact, Ichinojo 9 and 6 at Maegashira 2. 1, 2, 3. He rated higher, but Daisho was given the Komusubi slot because he was Maegashira 1 East, he had a winning record, and that was the only way to get him a promotion. So what we saw in the 60s doesn't happen anymore. The guys who are higher ranked and deserve some kind of a promotion are going to get it. That's just how they do it. But that doesn't necessarily answer why Kirabayama is going to get an extra Komusubi slot opened up for him. And for this, we need to look at the ones from the 90s. Now, Hatu 1992 is a little bit wilder. So Takatariki, Sekiwake 7 and 8 got dropped all the way to Maegashira 2 East. Koto Nishiki went to Maegashira 1 East, same thing. So here they're still dropping 7 and 8 Sekiwake down to Maegashira. So that's, again, that's not something that happens today really, but they were still doing it back then. But okay, so that opens up 2 Senyaku slots. Akebono is opening a Komusubi slot with his 13 and 2, so he's jumping up to Sekiwake. He can't go higher because he wasn't a Sekiwake already, which is necessary to become an Ozeki. So we've got 2 slots, but we've got 3 guys who are candidates for promotion. Waka Hanada, obviously he rates higher than Mito Izumi, and Taka Hanada, oh my god, 14 and 1 at Maegashira 2, he's off the charts. So we have Taka Hanada, who gets the other Sekiwake slot, and Waka Hanada, he goes up to Komusubi 1 West, and Tochinowaka, he just doesn't move. So Mito Izumi, they didn't have to promote him. There's 2 guys who were rated higher than him based on their records and their ranks, and they got the Komusubi 1 and Sekiwake slots that were available. Mito Izumi could have been left at Maegashira 1 East, but they didn't do that. They made another Komusubi slot for him. So that was a change from those previous occasions in the 60s when they took a guy in basically the same situation and just left him at Maegashira 1 East. Now we go to Nagoya 1995. This one's a little simpler to see what's going on. Akinoshima, he got hurt, he had to leave, so he Kenko, again, 11 and 4, Maegashira 4, so he rates up here. Koto Nishiki only rates to here. So they give Kenko the Komusubi 1 West slot that opens up as Kotonowaka moves over. But Koto Nishiki, again, didn't have to be given a promotion, but he was. They put him at Komusubi 2 West. Now, as it turns out, if you look back at the query list, which let's do that right now. So when we look at this list, everybody else, Komusubi 1, Sekiwake 1, there were slots available. So we haven't actually gotten to see the Banzuke committee choose to give a guy in Kirabayama's position an extra Komusubi slot. There just hasn't been an occasion for it. That doesn't mean that they're suddenly going to do things like they did in the 60s as opposed to how they did it in the 90s. They give preference to guys who are 8 and 7, Maegashira 1 East, need to get moved to Komusubi for a promotion, and the last time this happened, even though it was 30 years ago, an extra slot was given to that Maegashira 1 East at 8 and 7. Now, Ichinojo is still going to be pushed ahead of Kirabayama, I'm sure of that. He rates ahead of him by a mile. It's the only fair thing to do, and they can't drop Hoshoryu or Abi out of the Komusubi 1 slots, but you're going to get Ichinojo at Komusubi 2 East and Kirabayama at Komusubi 2 West. This is what history says is going to happen. They would have to break all kinds of precedent, and not just precedent, but all kinds of the evolution of how the Banzukes have been created over the years. They would have to go backwards in time which is just not a thing that you tend to see when you compare, year after year after year changes to the Banzuke. So I'm pretty confident Kirabayama gets that Komusubi 2 slot, and oh boy, I really hope he gets that Komusubi 2 slot, because if he doesn't, I am gonna get this whole thing wrong. One other thing that militates in favor of Kirabayama getting that promotion is just how rare it is these days for someone to go 8-7 at either a Maegashira or even a Juryo rank and not be promoted. What you're looking at on screen right now are the 3 occurrences since 2004 where somebody at one of those ranks went 8-7 but didn't move. 2 of them, you may recall if you saw the video, are from Kyushu 2019 going into Hatsu 2020. This was the Chaos Speedrun video I made. Yutakayama could have gone up a half rank if the committee hadn't been so nice to Tochinoshin, but Terutsuyoshi had nowhere to go. He was never going to go anywhere. He just got screwed by the whole process, the whole situation. He had no chance. Hidenoumi, you may remember from a previous video where I said it looked like he got completely screwed by the committee. He and Ryuden finished mathematically in the same spot. He could have been moved to Juryo 1 East and Ryuden to Juryo 1 West, and they both would have received some kind of promotion. But they moved Ryuden to Juryo 1 East and left Hidenoumi where he was. That is extremely rare. It really doesn't happen. Now, it is slightly more common for someone at Juryo 1 East to be 8-7 and not move, but that's a situation where the whole bottom of the Makuuchi division just has winning records, so there's nowhere to put the guy. Juryo 1 is not treated special like Maegashira 1 kind of is. You're just part of the math problem, and if there's nowhere for you to go, there's nowhere for you to go. In Hidenoumi's case, though, there was a spot for him to go, and I maintain that there is a very real chance they decided, you know what, we can justify putting Ryuden ahead of him and screw this guy in his gambling scandal. Let's send a message. So I don't think there's a lot that we can take from that. I don't think that it's a sign they're more willing to keep somebody at 8-7 without a promotion if there's an option to give him a promotion. We're already opening the Komusubi 2 slot with Ichinojo. Kirabayama is going to fit in there. I am going to be shocked if it doesn't happen. Famous last words. Alright, that's enough time spent talking about the Sanyaku when we have the whole rest of the Banzuke to get to. So let's lock in the Sanyaku and move on to everybody else. At this point, we need to do our basic calculations, like so. Now, you will notice that everybody who had fewer than 8 wins or losses, so everybody who hadn't already locked in a Makikoshi or a Kachikoshi, has not moved. They will. I am not assuming that they're going to be kept in place. But what I'm hoping for in this is that they will be pushed into certain spots so that it doesn't take a whole lot of trying to figure out how much movement will they be given, because there may just be spots that make sense without having to think about it too much mathematically. And we can see pretty quickly that Kotonowaka is one of those people that's going to be a pretty easy fit for us. Here's why. If somebody is 7-3 after 10 days, and then they just can't fight anymore, but you have to figure out approximately what is fair movement for them, you have to think about what are the likely outcomes for them. He had 5 fights left, so his possible outcomes were 5-0, 4-1, 3-2, ooh, that's a terrible 2, 2-3, 1-4, and 0-5, right? Well, there's only one way for him to go 5-0 and 0-5. So there's really no way that you can expect either of these things to happen. 4-1 and 1-4 are a little more viable, but 3-2 and 2-3 are the most likely outcomes. Well, which one do you choose? In some cases, we're going to have to figure that out, but in this one, we really don't have to. In any situation other than going 0-5, Kotonowaka would have a Kachikoshi. He would get a promotion. As long as you're not assuming he would go 0-5, he should get a promotion here. So if he's going to be promoted, well, he's ahead of everybody else that isn't already locked into a position. So he obviously has to go to Maegashira 1 East. Well, what do we do with everyone else? Again, this isn't too hard. Tobizaru and Nishikigi both had locked in Kachikoshis. Tamawashi didn't technically lock anything in, but at 5 and 7, he's not going to be able to go up. We can debate whether he should go down, how much he should go down, but he's not going up. That means if Kotonowak is at 1 East, we've still got 1 West, 2 East, and 2 West to fill. And what they do in these situations is they just take the guys who rise to the top in the math and they move them up in order. So that puts Tobizaru at 1 West, Nishikigi goes to 2 East, and Midori Fuji goes to 2 West. I realize that's a gigantic jump. I realize that is plus 9 ranks for him. That is a ton, but it's not that strange. In 2021, there was, in the Haru Basho, there were only 6 Rikishi from Maegashira 1 through 10 with a winning record. That's the same number that there were this time in Nagoya. Aoyama won 11 and 4 at Maegashira 12 and ended up at Maegashira 3, which is the same jump. A couple Bashos later, Chiyotairyu was Maegashira 14, went 10 and 5, and ended up at Maegashira 4. In that case, there were only 4 guys with winning records from Maegashira 1 to 10. When that happens, guys will make enormous jumps. It's not that weird. So even though Midori Fuji may look like he's getting promoted out of control, this is within precedent. This is normal. Now we go to 3 East. What do we do with Tamawashi? So Ura can't be at 4 West, right? Ura cannot end up here. So do we put him back at 3 West? Because he was 7 and 8. So he's not going to get pushed down an extra half a rank when there's all these spots at the top. So does he end up here? Or does he get no demotion at all? Well, I don't think they're going to leave him with no demotion unless it absolutely makes the most sense for them to do that. But does it? If Midori Fuji is getting all the way to Maegashira 2, what's wrong with Meisei going to 3 East? There's really nothing. And if he goes to 3 East, then you can push Tamawashi to 3 West, which at 5 and 7, it's very reasonable. Remember, they said that Izagahama said that they were going to treat these guys quote unquote fairly. Well, what does fairly mean? I'm taking the approach that fairly doesn't mean what I think is fair, but what I think is going to cause the fewest arguments in the committee room. If Ura is 7 and 8 and they bump him down half a rank, then Tamawashi also moving half a rank and them retaining the same relative spot next to each other is probably going to cause the least consternation amongst them. Meisei, if he doesn't get moved to 3 East, then he gets bumped down to at least 4 East, and now he's kind of falling away from Midori Fuji just to make sure that 2 guys with losing records don't get demoted at all. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to give them that little half-rank demotion. So you've got Meisei and then Tamawashi, then Ura at 4 East, and Takayasu at 4 West. Now, before I move on to the next part, I do want to make a note that because Ryuden is moving up from Juryo, I don't think he goes any higher than Maegashira 9 East. I don't think they're going to give him bonus promotion because he's coming from the division below. Now, he could stay right there. I actually think he's going to end up slightly lower, but we'll get to that. Right now, we're dealing with the lucky losers, Sadanoumi and Wakamoto Haru. They are bumped down here, but there's no one around them. There's nobody within 2.5 ranks of either of them. Now, Onisho is going to be the next one, or I'm sorry, Takara Fuji is going to be the next one, and then Onisho is going to be the one after that to get promoted into any empty slots. Well, if we move these guys up, Sadanoumi cannot go above Maegashira 5 West. Wakamoto Haru, because he ranks behind Sadanoumi, I think they are going to keep him there, which means he doesn't go above Maegashira 6 East. That leaves Maegashira 5 East, and that means Takara Fuji is the only person who can go there. if Sado no Umi and Wakamoto Haru are bumped up, and because they're several ranks ahead of Onosho, I would be a little surprised if they weren't moved. Onosho then fits in at 6 West. And then from there, you've only got Myogiryu to fill in at 7 East, because Aoyama, even though Aoyama was 6 East, he was 6 and 9. They're going to make sure to give him a decent drop. Tochinoshin was 8 East. Hokuto Fuji was 7 West. They can't go any higher than that. So this should fill out all the way down to 7 East. I do want to make the first of a few caveats here. You might have heard me say, well, Tamawashi and Ura are going to get some kind of a demotion, and that's why Meisei moves up. But then Sado no Umi isn't getting any demotion, and that pushes Onosho a little bit back. Why doesn't Sado no Umi go to 6 East, Wakamoto Haru go to 6 West, and Onosho jump to 5 West? And the answer is, that could very easily happen. That is an absolutely plausible outcome. It's not the one I decided purely because of Wakamoto Haru. The reason I think Wakamoto Haru is the key here is that Tamawashi and Ura, 1 rank drop for Ura at 7 and 8. Well, he only got a half. Tamawashi, 5 and 7. What do you do with that? We'll just stick with a half. That's fine. Wakamoto Haru, 3 ranks. Well, let's just make it 2. That's fine. Could they make it 2.5? Yeah, absolutely. Why do I think it's going to be 2? To just how I'm vibing on this one. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer for this. I think if you put Onosho ahead of those 2 guys, it makes perfect sense. In fact, I had him like that for several drafts. In this case, though, I simply think that they're going to say Onosho is already getting 8.5 ranks of promotion. We can save Wakamoto Haru and Sado no Umi 1/2 rank of demotion, and that's fine. And now we get to the first really fun part of this. Ryuden, Tochinoshin, Aoyama, Hokuto Fuji, and actually Nishiki Fuji works in here too. Well, how is that? So Koto Echo is stuck at 9 West, and we're looking at 4 ranks: 7 West, 8 East, 8 West, and 9 East. Okay? Well, why does Nishiki Fuji come in? I think, and again, this is one where the math doesn't say it, but given how they have treated promoted wrestlers from Juryo in the last couple of Banzukes, even though Ryuden ranks 3 spots ahead of Nishiki Fuji, I think in this case, they're going to put Nishiki Fuji ahead of Ryuden. It doesn't bump Ryuden back that far, and Nishiki Fuji had a good tournament. What I've noticed is that now having 3 Fusen wins is extremely rare. It might be unprecedented, but I don't think they're going to really take that into consideration. He's 10 and 5. They gave him the special prize. They will bump him up. So I think Ryuden is out of this calculation. I will put him at 10 and we'll get to that. So now, where do we put these 4 guys? So Aoyama and Tochinoshin are both a half rank ahead of Hokuto Fuji. Well, we've got 7 West available and 8 East. So does Nishiki Fuji go ahead here so that everybody gets some kind of a demotion? I thought that for quite a while. I had it like that for several drafts. But I started thinking about it a little more, and I realized that if I'm going to be wrong about something here, there's a good chance it's the Ryuden Nishiki Fuji thing. Ryuden could end up ahead, and I am just wrong in that respect. So if that's part of the conversation, there's no way Nishiki Fuji gets pushed all the way to 7 West. Alright, then what do we do? That actually makes things a little bit easier. Tochinoshin can only end up here, which means Aoyama is the only person who could end up at 7 West. Yes, Hokuto Fuji technically can be put there, but he rates behind those 2 guys, so he's going to stay behind those guys. That being the case, we've got Aoyama, who has to be the one to go to 7 West. Tochinoshin ends up at 8 East. Now, does Hokuto Fuji go to 8 West and Nishiki Fuji to 9 East? I think so, but I also had several drafts where they were reversed. Nishiki Fuji was at 8 West. It didn't make enough sense for me to keep it that way, for this reason, and I think this is going to be the key thing that makes or breaks my entire set of Banzuke theories this time around. Are they going to take the path of least resistance, and am I figuring out what that path is? Are they going to find the same things I do to be the points where they can get through with the least amount of argument? I think you have to convince people to put Nishiki Fuji ahead of Hokuto Fuji if you've already got Aoyama and Tochinoshin up at 7 West and 8 East, but I think you can put Hokuto Fuji ahead of Nishiki Fuji without actually having to argue the point. You just put them there and it looks right to people. That's why I think we're going to end up with Nishiki Fuji at the end of those 4 guys, which has us looking at this. All right. With those guys set, Ryuden and Endo fit very nicely at Maegashira 10. Now I have Endo at 10 East and Ryuden at 10 West. This is purely what I think is going to happen because Ryuden is coming up from Juryo and isn't coming up from the bottom of Makuuchi. This is speculation. It is an educated guess, but it is a guess. Nishiki Fuji could very easily, like I said, end up swapped with Ryuden. What I think would happen in that case is you end up with Ryuden at 9 East, Nishiki Fuji at 10 East, and then Endo at 10 West. The reason I have Endo ahead of Ryuden is purely because Endo was coming from the Joy and Ryuden is coming up from Juryo. Endo is getting, he went 3 and 9, so he's getting a slight bump up from the -6 that I had him at initially, but it's not much. Ryuden just goes behind him due to the divisional aspect. That's it. If Nishiki Fuji ends up at 10, he'll go ahead of Endo because of the preference, general preference that they've shown for people with winning records. And now we get to the fun question of what do we do with Ichiyamamoto? 6 wins instead of 7 makes it a lot harder to figure out what would have happened. After all, Chiyotairyu was 6 and 3 and he ended up 6 and 9. But 6 and 2 is a very good record. So what do we do with him? Well, let's look at this as a group. So we've got Ichiyamamoto, he was Maegashira 13 East. Okinoumi and Chiyotairyu are mathed out to that point. Takano Sho is lower, but because he's dropping from Maegashira 1 due to injury, there's a lot more play in terms of how the Banzuke committee will decide to rank him. So he actually becomes part of this conversation. What are the options here? Well, do you keep Ichiyamamoto at Maegashira 13 East because he simply didn't do enough to prove that he deserves some kind of a promotion? I think that is not completely crazy, but I don't think it's correct. If we try to look at the idea of being fair to these guys broadly, even 6 and 3 I could see as being, I don't know if that's enough because anything can happen, but 6 and 2 is awfully good. That's a great start. Remember also, Ichiyamamoto just started a tournament 6 and 2. He started 8 and 2, and then he went 8 and 7, but he still got his Kachikoshi. I think this committee is most likely to look at him and say, okay, 6 and 2 is +4. That would put him here, but they're not going to do that. If you think, all right, well, what's a likely outcome? 9 and 6, that would put him here. They're not going to do that because 6 wins, again, it doesn't quite prove enough. But if you want to give him credit for a Kachikoshi, you don't put him at 12 West because that's only half a rank. That doesn't make any sense. 12 East or 11 West. Those make sense. Well, where do you put everyone in around him? Let's start by having him at 12 West, right? Because that is exactly 1 rank. You could say, well, from 6 and 2, we think that he's going to get a Kachikoshi. We'll give him 1 rank and call it a day. Where does everyone else go? Well, Okinoumi and Chiyotairyu, they are at the same rank math-wise, so let's keep them next to each other. If you've got Ichiyamamoto at Maegashira 12 East, the only place they can go is 12 West and 13 East. I think Okinoumi in that case goes to 12 West because he was higher ranked to start with, and they both had losing records. That's the important part. Neither of them did well, but Okinoumi, on top of that, he also missed his last fight. because of COVID. So they'll give him that little bit of a benefit. So the best he could have finished was 5 and 10, that's 5 ranks. So they'll drop him 5.5, put him at Maegashira 12 West. Chiyotairyu goes from 10 East to 13 East. He just gets the full 3 rank drop for going 6 and 9. And Takano Sho ends up at 11 West. Going from 1 to 11 on a 1-win record is quite normal. That is within very much the realm of possibility. I should note that if you do the entire Banzuke for the one after a couple bashos ago, where Meisei had the 1 win at Maegashira 3 and then ended up at 13, I know some people thought that was less of a drop than he was going to get, or that he should have gotten, but when you play it all out, that actually makes perfect sense for him to end up here, or for him to end up there. Takano Sho, in this case, it's more of a judgment call, but the other option is really for Ichiyamamoto, we'll clear that, for Ichiyamamoto to end up at 11 West, Okinoumi to go to 12 East, Chiyotairyu to 12 West, and Takano Sho to 13 East. That's viable, and it's what I had for a few of my drafts. I just don't think they're going to do that. Chiyotairyu can be given the appropriate demotion, and it makes perfect sense. Okinoumi, if you give him 5 ranks of demotion, then what you end up with is a guy who you have essentially credited with getting the win in that last fight that he didn't actually participate in. I know that's not really how it works. If a guy gets, he gets bumped down mathematically and then there's just that vacuum that drags him back up, that's not the same thing. But in this case, you don't have to do that. You would actively be choosing to put him 5 ranks down instead of 5.5 or 6. I don't think that's what they do. In that case, Okinoumi, again, will clear this, and he goes to 12 West, Chiyotairyu to 13 East, and then your other option is just to flip Ichiyamamoto and Takano Sho. So Takano Sho goes to 12 East, and Ichiyamamoto goes to 11 West. I had this for a while. The reason I swapped out of this is because, very simply, if Ichiyamamoto is credited with a Kachikoshi, you bump him up a rank and you call it a day. If you are going to move him to 11 West, you have to say, this is why I think he deserves the extra half rank. And given everything else they have to deal with here, I just don't think they're going to bother. He was 6 and 2. Do we think he would have had a winning record? Yeah. Is it fair to give him a rank? Yeah, give him the rank. We're done. And then everybody else slots in around him. Easy peasy. The next 4 seem pretty straightforward. Oho, Chiyoshoma together, Yutakayama, Terutsuyoshi together, you give the winner priority over the loser, and then you're done. But I don't think it's quite that simple. See, Oho, 8 and 7, Yutakayama, 8 and 7. What they tend to do, not always, but what they tend to do is keep guys who are rank neighbors and have the same record together as rank neighbors. If they do that this time, even though the math says Chiyoshoma should be ahead of Yutakayama, it actually makes a lot of sense for them not to keep Chiyoshoma ahead of Yutakayama. If you put Oho and Yutakayama together and then Chiyoshoma and Terutsuyoshi together, then they're each getting, in those pairs, they're getting the same relative movement. If you put Oho at 13 and then Chiyoshoma here at 14 East and then Yutakayama at 14 West, well, now Oho and Yutakayama did the same thing at around the same rank, but Oho gets a full rank and Yutakayama only gets half. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you can do it in a cleaner way, I think they will make that choice. That means Oho and Yutakayama go together, Chiyoshoma and Terutsuyoshi go together, but who gets the boost? Who ends up at 13 West and 14 East? In this case, I do think they stick with the winners. Oho goes to 13 West, Yutakayama goes to 14 East, Chiyoshoma drops his 1 rank from 13 to 14, and Terutsuyoshi drops his 3 ranks from 12 to 15. It keeps the losing wrestlers together, the winning wrestlers together, the winning wrestlers who are rank neighbors with the same record together. It just works out very nicely, and I think that's what they're really going to want at this point in the process. The last group, thankfully, really is very easy to figure out. Tsurugisho was 14 west, 5 and 7. His math doesn't take him out of Makuuchi. On the other hand, Mitoryu was Juryo 4, went 9 and 6, so his math only took him to Juryo 1. Hiradoumi was 10 and 5, but he was Juryo 8, so his math only took him to Juryo 3. So Tsurugisho, the only one left in Makuuchi, so he gets 15 west. Mitoryu, well ahead of Hiradoumi, so he goes to 16 east, and then Hiradoumi takes the last spot in 16 west. Shimanoumi, Chiyomaru, Daiamami, we say goodbye to them, at least for now. And that'll do it for our predictions for the Aki 2022 Banzuke. Before we go, let's talk about the Guess the Banzuke game real quick and how that plays into some of these picks. Remember, it's 2 points if you get something correct, and 1 point if you just get the rank correct but the position wrong, east or west. Kiribayama, although I'm very confident he's going to get the extra Komusubi slot, and I'm willing to wager that basically the entire Banzuke on this being correct, we need to remember we are wagering the entire Banzuke on this pick. If this is wrong and he ends up at Maegashira 1 East, then everyone here moves over to West, and everyone here goes East 1 rank down, which means even if you got all of these correct in a relative sense, these are 1 point each and these are 0. So you've got your 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 points from the Sanyaku at the top, which we know are correct. We're assuming Ichino-jo is right, that's 18. And then you've only got 16 more guys, so that's 34 points. That does very poorly. On the other hand, if you think Kiribayama is not going to go up and he does, you're going to be wrong in the same way. So really, the entire Banzuke hinges on whether you get this right. I am just going to play the percentages. I think the percentages very strongly favor Kiribayama going up here, so we're just going to run with that. If we're wrong, we're wrong. The ones that are kind of 50-50, it might have been safer to just put Tamawashi and Ura at 3, because Tamawashi almost certainly will be somewhere at Maegashira 3, but it just seems correct that they're going to go down the half rank. Sadanoumi, Wakamoto Haru, I do think it's very safe to put Wakamoto Haru at a 6 rank, and then it's just a question of where these two go. I don't know which one would have been safer for the game, but I don't think there's really a good answer there. Aoyama and Tochinoshin I do feel are pretty safe. Because Nishiki Fuji, Endo, and Ryuden seem like they're the ones that are going to get shifted around potentially, Hokuto Fuji seems pretty safe. But because I don't know where these 3 are going to end up, putting Endo at 10 felt like the safest bet. Nishiki Fuji or Ryuden have a pretty good argument for being at 9 East, but Endo getting only a 4 rank demotion would be kind of surprising. So Endo at 10 seems safe, the other 2 you just got to take your best shot. Same thing with Takano Sho, Ichiyamamoto, Okinoumi, Chiyotairyu. The safest thing, if you were just playing for safe points, Okinoumi and Chiyotairyu both on 12 would probably be the play, but I just have a hard time seeing that happening. I am going for the gusto, I'm going for all the points here, so that's why I have Ichiyamamoto and Takano Sho where they are. This seems most likely, but I do think there is a very real world where Takano Sho gets dropped all the way to 13. This one is way up in the air. If I get this one completely right, either I'm a genius or a miracle worker. I'll take either one, but who knows with this. And then the question of Oho, Yutakayama, it really doesn't matter. This is the one that's probably the most gamed out, because if Chiyoshoma and Yutakayama are wrong, then they just flip, and they're on the same rank, and I still get a point for each one. Oho and Teretsuyoshi I'm pretty confident about, it's just the other 2. So there's really no reason to mess with that. If these 2 guys who are probably going to be on the same rank are the question marks, just leave them on the same rank, pick an order, and call it a day. That's it. That's all I got. It's been a video, man. It's been a lot of recording. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back for the next one. We're going to try some new stuff during the Basho this time, and I hope you're there for it. I'll see you around. Leave a comment, leave a like if you want to. Regardless, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you around.